start from Watcher Pass, and today I'm wearing my ugliest jungle shirt because I'm going to talk about the Jungle Cruise, which is releasing in theaters on July 30th, 2021. It's I don't know how Disney does it. I mean, I guess they did it again. They took a property that didn't really have any right to be a movie and turned it into a movie, and they did a pretty good job. I mean, there's some issues with it, but overall, you have a really fun adventure. And I guess I'll go into the story. The story is loosely based on the iconic Disney ride Jungle Cruise. And so you have some aspects of that. And there's also a good time to tell you that this review will have spoilers. I'm going to talk about the film and some aspects of the movie I liked, and then also the ending. So if you don't want to know anything about the movie, go to watcherpass.com. I put all my written reviews there. They're short, lightweight. They have no spoilers, so you can just kind of read and see what you think and then go see it. Or if you don't care about spoilers, all aboard. We're going to go talk about the film. So Jungle Cruise is based on the iconic Disney ride, and so you've got a lot of aspects of the ride built into the film, which you would expect, but it was actually really fun. Like there is a Jungle Cruise, so you have all the terrible puns, all the horrible setup, like everything that you kind of love and well, mostly love, maybe hate, but mostly love about the Jungle Cruise, the actual ride, is in the film. And then they kind of take that loose story and then bolt on an adventure about conquistadors and Nazis and like the Fountain of Youth, essentially. But they don't call it the Fountain of Youth. So they bolt on this adventure story onto that ride. But there's enough of the ride and enough of the humor, enough of the things that you love about it to make it enjoyable. And so this is probably a good time to talk about the three things I liked. So the first thing, part of the movie, the movie is so enjoyable because of the characters, and the main two are The Rock and Emily Blunt. They play, The Rock plays Frank, who is the Jungle Cruise operator, and he has his characteristic like wit and humor. Like he provides all the terrible puns. He provides some of the jank that makes the Jungle Cruise so lovable. He gives that in this film. Like his ship is kind of falling apart, and so there's instances where he has to like repair it as they're barreling towards something. He sets up the cruise that's in the film like the actual cruise and the ride. So he has some displays that are made and things like that. So The Rock is a fun character. I mean, The Rock can do almost no wrong, Hobbs and Shaw aside. The Rock can do almost no wrong, and I loved seeing him in this film. And then Emily Blunt can really do no wrong, and she was fantastic in this movie. She was a strong-willed, like very determined female adventurer. She's kind of like she's trying to be an archaeologist because she's hunting down this legend. And she's just she is a fantastic actor, and she's just a lot of fun. And the two of them together are a lot of fun to see because they have very different characters. They get along really well, and they form a lot of the heart. And then another thing I loved, similar, along the same lines of the characters. So Disney did this in Cruella. They had a gay character, although I don't think he ever said he was gay, but he was fairly clearly gay. He was in the fashion industry. It makes sense. In this film, Emily Blunt, who plays Lily, her brother, McGregor, played by Jack Whitehall, is gay as well. But in this film, he actually says something along the lines of, my family disowned me because of who I loved, or something like that. Or I couldn't be happy because of who I loved, or something like that. So he actually takes a step further and kind of says that, who he loves caused a rift in his family. And it's very helpful. I mean, that he's talking about a man because he basically says something along the lines of, a woman wouldn't be who I loved. He says that earlier in this conversation. So Disney's again taking steps to have gay characters in their films. It seems like it's a trend for the PG-13 side of things. But hey, you know what? It's a step. It's a step in the right direction. I like that they are prominently featuring gay characters. And this character he's a main character. He is, one of the main adventurers in this film. He has a lot of screen time. He does a lot of great things. So I do appreciate that. There's some things about it that I'll go into, and the things I didn't like, but I think Disney's taking steps in the right direction. They I wish that they would just go full on and have a character who says that they're gay or something along those lines, just to like drive it home and have it be a more clear step. But they're taking steps, and so they kind of have to be applauded for that. The second thing I love about the film is the comedy, and I kind of talked about some of that already. It has a lot of that like Jungle Cruise, terrible puns, horrible references, cringeworthy jokes, like, and I love that stuff. Like I'm a dad; those are kind of essentially dad humor. It's perfect. But then there's also a lot of like there's non cringeworthy humor as well. Like the movie is just, it's a funny movie. There's a lot of good jokes. There's a lot of laugh out loud moments. Some of it's related to the terrible puns. Some of it's just related to the interactions between the characters. And so this is a movie that you can go in and just be entertained and laugh. And the next part of the entertainment is the third thing I love is the action. This film, it has a good amount of action. There's some really fun sequences. There's some exciting sequences, especially on the river when they're fighting against the currents in some instances, or when they're fighting the antagonists in this film. The action is enjoyable. It has a lot of pirates, so I'll go into that later. But it feels a lot like pirates, like this kind of high seas-ish adventure, although you're on the Amazon rainforest. And so you get this enjoyable action comedy movie with some great characters. So there really isn't a ton to not like about this film. But I'm going to go into some things I didn't like, because the movie is not perfect, but overall it is just a fun trip. And I'm impressed with Disney that they keep doing this. They keep coming up with reviving these properties and making movies with properties that just shouldn't have movies. Now, I guess there's an argument to be made, well, they should go and make new movies, new properties, and not kind of bolt on these good feelings. But they're trying, and I at least enjoyed the ride. So things I didn't like, there were some stereotypes in the film, and some of it is supposedly based on the timeline. Like The Rock calls Lily pants because she's a woman wearing pants, and in this time period, women didn't really wear pants that much. And it was it was kind of clever the first time, and then it was okay the second time. But he keeps calling her that throughout the film, even after she's like proven that, look, she's an adventurer, she's a capable person, she is just as capable as any of the men in the crew. Like, he keeps calling her pants, and I guess maybe it becomes a pet name at some point, but it just felt odd, like about the 20th time that it happened. I wish that he would have called her Lily, or said something else, just anything else really. And then the other thing is, so I brought it up as a plus. I really liked McGregor's character. I like the fact that he was openly gay. But they also did, they kind of stereotyped him, and maybe part of that is to drive home his character and to make it clear that he's a gay character. But they made him a little more effeminate. Like, he had a bunch of luggage. He didn't fight very well, although they did make a point of when he threw a punch, they said good form. So he did actually get some of the action. But they also made him like a fairly stereotypical character, if you were going to make like a stereotypical gay character. And so on the one hand, I applauded Disney for it, but on the other hand, maybe they didn't need to make him as stereotypical. Now, he was enjoyable. I liked his character. He had some funny lines, especially with some of the things he brought. Like, he brought way too much luggage, and some of that was ridiculous, and that did provide some humor. But overall, I wish they would have maybe skewed a little bit away from the stereotypes, and just kind of I'm not sure. I guess they would have. Overall, I just kind of wish they would have made him a little less stereotypical. The next thing I didn't love is the story. It just makes no sense. I mean, it's fine. Like, the story is just kind of bolted on to provide you with this adventure, but you have this Jungle Cruise adventure that then has like zombie conquistadors and Nazis and a submarine and torpedoes. And you have this tree of life that is kind of like the Fountain of Youth, but it's not, because it's a tree and it only blooms at a very, very specific time. And you're led to believe that they've done this before, but it's so specific and so, so cumbersome to do that I can't imagine they do it more than once. But so you have all these elements in the story, and you've got and it doesn't it doesn't make a ton of sense, but it's fine. Like, it's enough of a framework to get the adventure going and to kind of have you moving along, and there's enough surprises in there that makes it fun. So but just be warned, the story, it's kind of all over the place, but it's still fun. The last thing is, this movie has a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean like feeling, and it feels like Disney is really trying to get that feeling out there. But Pirates was a really fun movie. Like, I loved the first one. The later ones weren't great, although I did like the last one more than I expected to. And they kind of, it makes sense they go with that formula, because it has a lot that's appealing. It's got comedy, it's got action, it's got some really good music. I mean, you get and you have these supernatural elements that make it feel like more of an adventure than if it didn't have anything supernatural. So it makes sense that they would really pull for that pirate's ring. But it does feel like maybe they're trying a little too hard. Some of the enemies, they kind of became these like supernatural creatures with like special powers because I guess they were locked away for so long that it kind of gave them special powers, I guess. I mean, it was rough, but it did make it more exciting when you had like a zombie guy that had like snakes coming out of him, or like a bee guy that had honey. Like that did make them more interesting, but it also just kind of seemed like coming out left field. So um the ending of the film, and I'll try my best to recall it, because like I said, the story is kind of a mess. But so you have the Rock, or so Frank, who's the Rock, Lily, Emily Blunt, and McGregor, Jack Whitehall. They're pursued by the conquistadors. And at some point, McGregor gets hurt. He gets hurt, I think, fighting off some of the. Yeah, he gets hurt when they're trying to fight off the conquistadors in one scene. And so Emily Blunt and The Rock go off on their own to find I forget what they called it, but I'll just call it the Tree of Life, to find the Tree of Life. They finally decode the map and they get to the destination. And so they go through this harrowing kind of puzzle to drain this area, to open up the chamber that the Tree of Life sits in. And when they're draining it, as the water drains, they discover the submarine that's driven by the Nazi zombie. They're not zombies. Sorry, it's driven by the Nazis, who aren't Nazis, but they kind of are Nazis. They don't, they look like maybe a mishmash of World War I German soldiers, but they're in like a high-tech submarine, so they're pretty much Nazis, I think. And then, but maybe it was during World War I. I don't think they ever actually said the date, so maybe. But I think the submarine was a little too advanced for it to be a World War I submarine. But that's okay. And the Nazis are there, and they have captured McGregor. They captured him before, and he's now being held hostage. So they use McGregor to convince Lily and Frank to help them find the Tree of Life. Well, they convince him very, very forcefully. So they eventually get in there. They unlock the secret that gets the tree to bloom, but the tree only blooms for a very specific time. It's only during a certain moon, and only when that moon is passing over a very small window. So when they finally do get the tree to bloom, it doesn't have that much time. And so before this, Lily had said, I'll help you, but I need to have one flower. And The Rock said, I'll help you, but I also need to have one flower. So McGregor, so the Nazi guy, basically said, you can have one flower, you can choose what to do with it. And so Lily betrays The Rock by shooting him after they open up the tree. Now, before this, you learn that The Rock was also, spoilers, was also one of the conquistadors that went out looking for the Tree of Life. Like, I think it was 400 years ago in this film. A group of these Spanish conquistadors came to the Amazon to try to find this Tree of Life. Because the leader, Aguirre, his daughter was sick, and so he needed this flower from the Tree of Life to cure her, because it's said to cure all diseases. And so they went looking through the jungle. The jungle eventually, almost killed them, and they were nursed back to health by the people that are watching the Tree of Life, and they used these magical flowers to nurse them back to health. And so Aguirre double crosses them, tries to take the tree and take the petals back. And when he's doing that, he slaughters them. And The Rock, who is a member of this group, decides that he doesn't want to slaughter them. He thinks it's wrong, and so he fights back. So he is a member, but he's not as hell-bent as they are. But what happens is the shaman leader of the natives curses the conquistadors, all of them, including The Rock, unfortunately. And so they have to stay. He curses them to stay by the river for all eternity, and they can never leave the river. So they're basically immortal, but they can only stay by the river, which, kind of limits what you can do. And if they ever leave, get too far from the river, they get pulled back in. And so The Rock wants the flower to, essentially cure himself of this curse and be able to kind of move on. So Lily betrays him by shooting him, but because the rock is immortal, it doesn't actually kill him. But the Nazis don't know that. So then she goes up and gets, she but then she goes up, climbs a tree, gets a flower, and while she's doing that, the Rock does his Rock thing. He kind of sneaks onto a boat, takes out some of the Nazis, tries to free himself and McGregor, and eventually Lily as well. But during the struggle, one of the Nazis fires their gun, which alerts the other Nazis that they're being betrayed. And so that leads to the main Nazi with Lily. They kind of get into a scuffle. She gets one of the flowers, but then she's about to kind of fall off the tree because they're fighting. And eventually what happens, as the moon is waning, the tree starts to degrade and it essentially like dies. Like, I don't really understand. I guess it gets reborn every time it sees the moon, but it essentially like dies. Like the branches start falling off, they start cracking. And so the Rock has at this point secured the ship. He's kind of pulling it under to catch Lily, but Lily drops the flower for him, and then I think she lets go. I'm not 100% sure, but I think she kind of lets go, but ends up being okay. But as the flower is falling, the Rock gets it. And at this point, the conquistadors all come as well. They converge because they kind of had a message that this is where the tree was. And they also want the tree so they can cure themselves. They can cure themselves of the curse and they can also move on. So the Rock has the flower. He wraps it in a bundle and then gives it to McGregor. So he tells him to get off the ship. You don't know that they give it to McGregor, but that's what the Rock grabs the flower, wraps it in the bundle, and tells McGregor to get off the ship. And so McGregor gets off, and the Rock, essentially draws the conquistadors to him because they hate him. They want to kill him, and also they want the flower. So they're following him, not realizing that the Rock is barreling the ship towards a wall that will block off the water. So as they're fighting him, they eventually, they can't kill him because no one can kill him, but they eventually incapacitate him and open up the package that he had the flower in and realize the flower's not there. And then the ship barrels into the wall, rubble falls down, the water from the Amazon gets blocked. Somehow, I don't really know how it would because it didn't look like it would from, what the layout was, but it does. And then that causes all the conquistadors, including the Rock, to pull towards the river. And what happens when they get pulled towards the river and they can't get there? They dry out because they need that water. But they're still alive, so it's kind of like they're being tortured. And so all of them, including the Rock, have that happen. Pan over to McGregor and Lily. McGregor shows her the flower. And so Lily's excited because she wants this flower to cure diseases. She wants to cure all the world's diseases. She wants the flower to be studied by medicine. But I guess she's also upset because now the Rock is kind of condemned to this fate. And so she goes up and gives the Rock the flower, which, I mean, yeah, it makes for a better movie, but she has the chance to cure all disease with this flower, and she gives it to the Rock. Now, granted, maybe she's not sure if the medicine could have been made from the flower, but she knows that the Rock is going to suffer eternity, so she wants to save him. Yeah, all right, that's fine. So she gives the Rock the flower. He recovers, and then, but what happens is, I guess a little bit of moonlight peeks through. Something happens, and another flower blooms, and they're able to get that flower. So at this point, I think they have a second flower that they don't know what happens to. But the Rock escapes. He's recovered. They go back to the river outpost that has been the Rock's home for 400 years. And then it fast forwards to London because now the Rock can leave the river and he's with Lily. They're learning to drive. They're in London. So he essentially traded the beautiful, serene Amazon rainforest with all of its nature and wonderful diversity to go to London in this it's the 1940s London. So I guess it's still pretty cool because you got all the buildings and stuff. But I don't know. Nowadays, maybe the rainforest would be a better place. I don't know. But so they end up in London. You get the feeling that the Rock and Lily are going to have a full life, which is, kind of something that the Rock has been hoping for. he had lives, but you didn't really get attached to anyone because of how painful it was. So now he can have a real life and then pass on, which kind of sucks for the conquistadors because they're basically going to be tortured forever. And they did a terrible thing. Like they slaughtered this village. It was awful. But at some point you gotta wonder how long their suffering should be. But that's that's their fault. They shouldn't have done that. So, and that's Jungle Cruise. Like I said, the story is kind of all over the place, but what you get is a really fun adventure. Like you get aspects of the Jungle Cruise ride, you get really great characters, you get a lot of humor and a lot of good action. So overall, I think it's a fun thing to see. It's fun to see how Disney did this. Bolted on this ride. Is it a great movie? No, but it's enjoyable and it's a lot of fun. And if you wanted to take your kids to go see it, that'd be fine. But be warned, it's a PG-13 movie. It's a PG-13. There's a lot more violence and death than I expected because I didn't look at the rating before I went in. Luckily, I didn't take my kids, so I didn't have to, cover their eyes or leave early. But it is a pretty scary film. I don't think I would take a young kid to it. Or maybe, if your kid is comfortable with PG-13, it is a little scarier, a little more action-packed than I think I would have expected. But overall, it's a really fun film and it's a fun adventure. So that's Jungle Cruise. It releases in theaters July 30th, 2021. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot and make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.